everyone, Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional level 2, the creator of SNAP, Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities, and the owner of Claremont Mental Health. Had a little caffeine this morning. I was able to say that really fast. That's fun. I'm here with my brother, Andrew.
That's right. And I have no credentials other than being Mandy's brother. So that's a pretty good credential, though.
You do have some credentials. You've had some successes in podcasting.
It's true.
And so that's one of the reasons why I want you to do this with me, is because I got to do some podcasting with you and it was really fun. And I thought we did well. I was entertained by us anyway.
I agree. And, if it's fun because some of those podcasts we've done in the past are kind of like little time capsules, and it's fun to go back and listen to them and think, what was going on at that time? And just to hear our voices, because we like to talk to each other in an entertaining fashion. And I hope that that comes across on these recordings as well. So,
I mean, at least we're entertained.
That's the important thing.
All right. Okay. We already posted our video, which was an introduction to this project. And the project is an analysis of a toxic family system. And we're using the television show Succession from HBO as an example of a toxic family system. We have the Roy family, and we have the businesses that they own, and the players that are involved on that television program, and they are really super abusive and toxic. So what better example to use? So if you haven't looked at the first episode yet, I would go back and watch that first, because we basically outline how we're approaching this. And then two, we list these different themes that we're looking for as we go through each of the seasons. And so we're going to divide it up by character and season. So today we're doing Kendall Roy, season 1. And Andrew just watched it. I've seen it 3 times, but it's been a while since I watched it the last time, which was the 3rd time, but Andrew just watched it. So you have more of the play-by-play in terms of the episode, or this season and how it goes for Kendall. And so I'm going to let you lead us through, because it's fresher in your mind. And then I have my own thoughts and notes that I've put together from when I watched it too. So I'm going to get started by saying that Kendall Roy, as far as I can tell, and this is a fictional character, so I'm allowed to discuss tendencies. I'm allowed to discuss typical diagnostic criteria. This is a fictional character, not a real person. So as a therapist, I am allowed to discuss this. We're not diagnosing Kendall, because Kendall doesn't really exist. But Kendall is definitely a narcissist. I think everyone can agree on that. We also see some psychopathic tendencies with him, because there's a serious lack of compassion, lack of empathy within Kendall. He's very callous and cruel. And then we know that he has a substance use disorder, and that comes into play for sure. When we start off the season, not so much, but in the beginning, he's sort of in recovery and he seems sober. But then we know that throughout the season that goes to hell in a handbasket pretty quickly. But substance use disorder is definitely in the mix. And then we also see some tendencies of bipolar disorder, where he is manic and sort of losing touch with reality. He's already pretty, out of touch with what it's like to be just a regular person. He's already pretty out of touch. But then when he gets in these manic states, he becomes even more out of touch. And then we see him crashing in a depressive state. So bipolar features are definitely present. And something that I'm noticing right off the bat with him as we go through is that he knows how to control the narrative really well. He has zero self-worth outside of his external features. And he's a spoiled brat who throws tantrums. But we do see a lot of tantrum throwing on this show. It's not necessarily specific to him. I think there's a lot of that happening all the way around. But let's just start at the beginning. Andrew, when we start off, what kind of a state is Kendall in? When we first meet him, what's our first impression?
Meeting Kendall on this show is a fascinating thing because they tell you everything you need to know about him in the first couple minutes. And what it is that he is in the back of an SUV. He's on his way to the big, business meeting where he's going to be announced as the new CEO of Waystar Royco or whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. Now, the way that the filmmakers portray him right here is just expert filmmaking, because what happens is we see him, pumped up. We hear this amazing rap music and he's got headphones on, much like I do, and he's listening to it and rapping along. So we get to see inside Kendall's head and how he views himself. And then he takes the headphones off and we hear him rapping along from the outside and how other people view him. I would say that he's in an excited state, just to answer your question, but what a fascinating way to meet a character, really smart. And it teaches us a lot about him right away, that his view of himself is not in the realm of reality, shall we say.
And it's a really great example. I've seen a lot of memes that describe narcissists, and you might see one where like they're standing in front of a mirror, and you see what they really look like, but in the mirror, they're a king with a crown on, or they're a big lion, with a mane, but, they're actually just a normal person that's like a little weak stick figure. So how he views himself versus how the world sees him is sort of how we meet him, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And we know that he's sober. It's mentioned that he hasn't done cocaine in 3 years, I think is mentioned. And we also see that he's working out and he's kind of eating healthy. He's drinking some shake. And so it seems like he kind of has his shit together, but you can tell that, he has worked hard to get where he is in this present moment, that he's on the other side of some kind of bottom. And we also recognize that Rava, and I'm not sure at what point she enters into this very first, episode that we're talking about, but Rava even mentions at one point in time him snorting cocaine off his kids' iPads or something like this. Yeah. So there's just little tiny comments that get made that you're picking up on, like, okay, this person has a history and they're clearly something's not right with the marriage too. So what's your next marker in terms of the progress of what you were watching?
Well, we learned that, like throughout all this, he shows up at the office building to, have his big announcement, and the rug gets pulled out from under him. His father is having health issues, that's how the show actually starts, and we meet him first. So in a lot of ways, we do meet Kendall before we meet Kendall, because we meet Logan, and Logan's having health issues, and this is causing him insecurity. And the way that insecurity manifests for him is like an animal backed into a corner. He lashes out, he, destroys everything near him, and builds himself up. And so, what his choice, like, it's also his 80th birthday. And there's this really kind of like complicated thing going on here.
He's 80? Logan Roy is 80?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Did not know that.
And it's, that adds a little bit to the story, right? Because he is too old, he is, but he won't admit it, and that's a big part of the story of Succession. But so he shows up to the, to this big meeting, and the rug's pulled out from under him. It turns out that his father is choosing to stay on instead of announcing Kendall. And he didn't tell Kendall this. He has embarrassed Kendall in front of everyone. But the kind of like stated reason, or the reason that the show kind of gives us that this happens, is because a little bit of Logan's health, issues, but also because his son Kendall makes a choice. He is involved in a big acquisition. All right, it's a big meeting. It's super important, right? What would his dad do? Would his dad go and attend his son's birthday party instead of going to the acquisition? So Kendall is stuck at the situation where, should he go to his father's 80th birthday party to celebrate his father's 80th birthday, which he knows means a lot to him, or should he go to this meeting? So he kind of chooses both. He's on the fence. He goes to the party after kind of bombing the meeting, and then his father is like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh shit, I'll leave. And he goes and then handles the meeting thing, and it actually handles it in a very strong way, and kind of gathers power from his father when he's there at the birthday party to go do this. And it's just fascinating because in the Roy family, empathy is a weakness. And it's not only a weakness, it's despised and it's disgusting. It's not something you should have. So showing empathy to his father was not the correct choice there in his family. It was showing empathy to the company is more important, and what that can get him and how important that might look. And again, just to go to your point, it's what everything looks like. It's not how it is.
Yes. Yes. So one of the things that we notice is that Logan does a lot of future faking with him. And so I guess it could be said that when we meet Kendall, he's in the midst of a future faking.
It's
because
constant.
he thinks that something's about to happen and then it doesn't happen. He gets kind of led around by Logan with a carrot on a stick for pretty much the whole series.
We get the idea that this has been happening to all of the children their entire lives, and learning how each one of those children deal with this is one of the big, interesting things about the show. I don't know if I'd say it's fun, but it's definitely interesting to see how they react to Logan's, future faking and constant baiting of them,
So you said that, here he's getting kind of set up and then the rug gets pulled out from under him. And I look down at my notes and I see daddy giveth and daddy taketh away is what I wrote. It seemed very clear that, daddy's the one that is calling the shots, and he has the ability to pick them up and drop them, depending on his mood or his whims. And then we also start to notice that Kendall has some suicidal ideation going on, that's something that is either in his past or we see it as a theme throughout. At a certain point when Logan is unwell and they're trying to, figure out what to do, and they think the right thing to do is to keep going without him and to proceed. And Kendall, I think at this point, is standing outside. You know how he goes outside and kind of looks over the edge?
Yes.
And Jerry comes up and says, "Don't jump."
And he's got this kind of look in his eye like, yep, this could all be over right now. No more pain, no more, that maybe this carrot goes right off the roof here. And, it makes us a little sympathetic towards him. And I think that's part of the reason it's in there. There is a holiday, Thanksgiving happens. All right. And this is a very traumatic event happens at Thanksgiving for Kendall. For Kendall's son. So Kendall, we've learned that Kendall, I would say one word that pops up in my mind when I see Kendall doing anything is he has an impotence about him, that he can't do things. There's certain things he cannot do. And one of the things he can't do is stand up to his father. He can't do it while he's in the room, that's for sure. And he can't do it for business purposes. He can't do it for his own purposes. And he can't do it for his own children's purposes, as far as trying to save them from the abuse that he's been going through. And, Logan's reach is so strong that it goes through a generation into the next one. And, Kendall is not smart enough or strong enough to defend his own children against Logan's abuse. And so not only does Logan yell at his son, who is autistic and very, very has sensory issues, is a very delicate human being in every respect, he punches him in the face. He punches the kid in the face. So that happens at Thanksgiving, and Kendall's, he kind of has a resolve to handle his father after this, but the way that he chooses to handle it, we'll get into. But his inability to protect his son just makes him an awful person in a lot of ways. And it's really on display here.
Well, you can see what it's like for a toxic family system when it comes to family gatherings and get-togethers, is that what's the most important is that everyone shows up and shows their face. And that is more important than protecting yourself or protecting someone else from the mistreatment that could happen at those events. A lot of my clients, especially around the holidays, birthdays, graduations, one thing they're talking to me about is, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to that wedding. I don't want to go to that Christmas. I don't want to go to that event because I know what's going to happen there. But if I don't go, then I'm the black sheep, and and then there's a backlash for not going. So I think we see these family gatherings throughout the series where they're always really super awkward. And you think to yourself, why did you even show up to this? It's really not that important. I guess it is to them though, right? Well, one thing I noticed is that, so I think this falls in line with what you mentioned before of how that Kendall shows up there, but it's almost like he was supposed to be working. It's not maybe in the first episode, but in the season, there's a moment where he does to his son what Logan does to him.
Kendall decides to retaliate for this whole abuse thing and the way he's been treated by trying to take his father out with a vote of no confidence. All right. That is his plan. While he's planning that, I believe his son comes into the room and he's just cusses his son out because he doesn't know who it is. And the person is interrupting a phone call, whoever they are. So they deserve my wrath. And so not only does Logan abuse, his son during this whole situation in the season, so does Kendall.
Right. Yeah. And then we even hear stories or there's mentions along the way of how as kids, they would be sitting outside his office door, just waiting to catch a glimpse of him or waiting to get his attention, and so you see Kendall's son, come to the door and then he gets screamed at just like they got screamed at when they were kids. Okay. So there was the scene where Jerry is kind of, getting Kendall, acclimated to the current state of things. And Kendall finds out that their dad has got them into some kind of financial jam or debt. So then Kendall thinks that he can be his dad, and he gets on the phone with the bank. And instead of being professional, he tries to puff up and be like his dad does, where he's chews people out and tells them what to do. Logan doesn't do that all the time. Logan knows sometimes when he needs to be smoother and nicer and more respectful to get what he wants. But Kendall doesn't have that savvy nature to him at this point. He's pretty awkward. And you hear him tell the banker to fuck off on a call that's like a speakerphone call, and the banker is silent, and it is awkward. Yeah. It's I don't appreciate being spoken to in that tone. And Kendall's oh. But he gets very childish when he is supposed to be serious, when he's supposed to be rising to the occasion. There's times when he just kind of laughs things off and it makes it weird. But he does that as a smoke and mirrors or a smoke screen. It's I really can't rise to the occasion in this moment. I know that I'm going to flounder, so I'm just going to act like I don't care. And since I act like I don't care, then it won't hurt me if I fail. Now, I don't know if you've heard, I don't know if you've watched the comedian John Mulaney. I just think he's hilarious. He was a writer for Saturday Night Live, and he's got some stand-up. But in one of his bits, he describes Trump in the White House as a horse in a hospital. Okay, there's a horse in the hospital. Anything could happen. And you got this vulnerable place that's supposed to be safe. And then this horse is this big, clunky, and who knows, right? And I feel that Kendall is in a lot of ways, you see not just Kendall, but the spoiled brat children. It's that, you have spoiled children competing to take over a multi-billion-dollar operation that affects the globe. It's kind of similar. You're oh God, we don't want Kendall in charge. Look at him. And then it's oh, Connor wants to be president. Holy shit, that's not a good thing. Greg has power now. What? These people wield power, and yet they're not really someone that should have that kind of power.
It's true. Now, back to what you said about Kendall trying to bully this banker. So he had gone to the birthday party. He got bullied by his dad. So he said, well, I'm going to go bully this Walter guy. So they do this acquisition thing. he bullies the acquisition guy, and it works because he's in a position of power over him. The banker is in a position of power over Kendall, and he tries to bully up. He tries to punch up. And so that's something like, first of all, that's dumb. You know, he doesn't know not to do that. He doesn't know who he can bully and who he can. But it also goes to show you that Logan has taught him nothing. He has thrown his children in the water and said, swim. And if you don't, fuck off, I guess is how he would put it. Right. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, it's just fascinating to see someone like Kendall who can be so capable when it comes to, like, he knows business. He really does. And when it comes to optics and all the terms and what everything means, he really knows his stuff. And he wants to take the company in a forward direction. Whereas Logan wants to take everything in a backwards direction. This is the way that everyone else sees it. And so, but you know, Logan is the one who's on top. So it's just fascinating to me because we learn throughout everything that Kendall does, we learn what his childhood was like. We learn what he's been taught and what he hasn't. And we see these kids who are adults pounding their head on the wall, trying to find their way in the dark. And it's unbelievable. And that's all of us, you know, it really is. It's all of us. We're all doing that. But unlike, you know, the Roys, I feel like I learn stuff and I try to learn from others, and they are not able to learn from others, and they are not able to learn from their own family as well. So they're emotionally stunted, and their ability to learn, emotionally is stunted as well.
Yeah, they're not teachable.
No,
definitely not. Now, Kendall is easily, manipulated by his ego. You can manipulate him very easily if you know the creature you're dealing with, and you see how the other sharks. Now, remember back, we did this previous episode, which was an introduction. One of the characters or groups that we're going to be examining are the sharks. And you see Kendall interacting with the sharks throughout. Sharks would be like Stewie, and Sandy, the executives, Jerry, Carl, Frank, those are all sharks. And then in the end, Mattson, and
Hugo.
Hugo, you mentioned the Vulture guy.
Right.
These are all the sharks. And so we'll be definitely focusing on them during our series that we're producing here. But, one of the things that I mentioned is that how Kendall gets acts very childish and gets very, tries to be funny when he's uncomfortable. And you can see all of the children acting childish when they feel uncomfortable, or when they would normally need to have an adult, mature response to something. I mean, Roman, they all kind of have these very immature ways of dealing with things. Now, one of the themes that we've noticed is wildlife metaphors. Remember that when Logan gets better and comes back, he pees in Kendall's office.
Yeah, which is...
I don't think that was a mistake. I think he was kind of thinking that they would wonder, did he do it? Did he not do it? Maybe it was because he was not with it at the time, because he did have a stroke. But I really feel like this was him marking his territory.
It certainly is. And regardless of whether it was conscious or not, it was subconscious, which means it was like the animal brain, is what he was thinking with right there. So, when we experience something physical like a stroke or something like that, and you're not with it, your brain reverts to instinct. His instinct was to pee, in his son's office and to show, hey, this is mine still. And it's funny because even his animal instincts are correct in business, because his son is trying to take him over, and so is everybody else. So it's real as far as that goes. The fears that his subconscious are trying to combat with urine are real, but at the same time, it's just wild. What a great, I know that we're talking about this as if this is real, but what a great storytelling device. All the stuff that we see in this first season, it's just fascinating, and it just all plants seeds that all grow, later on and continue to grow. It's tremendous.
Okay, so one of the scenes we see is when Stewie comes to meet Kendall at Kendall's flat in New York, and it's on Thanksgiving, I believe. And at one point, Kendall can't figure out how to make a cup of coffee. He had said that they sent the staff home for the holiday, is what he said. Because I think Stewie was kind of like, what, you can't make coffee, and he's like, oh, I sent the staff home. Actually, he did not send the staff home. He still had staff there, and then he had to say, oh, skeleton crew or something like this. Like, okay, so this goes under the heading or the theme that we discussed in that very first episode of objectification. And I noticed that, one of the things we talk about here in a few minutes has to do with not a real person involved, NRPI, not a real person. And we'll discuss that in just a second. But this, I feel, is the first time we really get introduced to that, is those people don't count. He said there's no staff here, they're off. But there's definitely staff there. And it's like he doesn't even count them as people. And it's like doesn't even register for him that there is still people working on the holiday for him.
And the way the show portrays all of the servant type people is that they're almost always ethnicity, other than white, and they're never ever in the center of the screen, ever. So like they're always on the peripheral, and they're always leaning into the frame or something like that. Even for example, the driver who is involved in the kind of climax of the season we'll talk about. Yeah, he's quite involved, but we never see him in the center of the screen. He's leaning in to talk to somebody. He's doing something off screen that we can hear, but it's like, it's just fascinating to me how they allow us as viewers of the show to be the staff too. It's from our point of view that the staff is seeing, or we're seeing from their point of view, just as the way the camera isn't a voyeur, it's in the room. And us as the viewers are supposed to be in the room with them, but we're not a part of it, and so I really like that. It's cool. It's a cool show.
So then, you already mentioned the Thanksgiving scene, and I had a note about that too. And one of the themes that we discussed previously and will be discussing is callousness. So here we have this kid who has anxiety, and he doesn't come into the room yet because he needs a minute to acclimate. And Rava even says something like transitions are hard. And then Logan kind of mocks that and is like, fuck that, bring him in here, and yeah, he's just a real asshole to his grandchild. I think they're playing a game, and the game is like you're passing a can around and you have to like recite something that was said.
Yes.
And of course, Logan just had a stroke, but his pride and ego won't allow him to, dip out of the game or get help for the game. He just is like, I will win this game, And I think he fails, and the kid points out, you lost.
Yes.
Your turn's over. And he goes to reach for the can, and then I think he gets backhanded or something like that by Logan. So just the callousness, and even in his state of recovery from a stroke, his nature, his lower nature, his true nature allows him to beat his own grandchild because the grandchild pointed out that he
wasn't playing because he wasn't playing by the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Because he cheated. That's why.
Yeah,
and so because everyone was trying to feed him the answers, because they're all trying to kiss his ass. Everyone's trying to kiss Logan's ass 24/7, even his closest family. And so, Marcia, his wife, is like, and then it was this, trying to feed him the answers. So he doesn't even play by the rules of the game that he wanted to play. Someone, even in his family, points out, hey, you're not playing by the rules, backhands him. And whether it's an accident or not, just like peeing in Kendall's office, it's the same exact thing.
Now you bring up Marcia, which is good because that's one of the next notes I have here is that, Marcia is playing her own game, we know, and she's going to be in the Sharks episodes. But one of the things she does is she she tells Logan, or sends a message to, no, excuse me, she sends a message to Kendall saying your father would like to have dinner with you tonight.
Mhm.
And Kendall shows up, and Logan had no idea who was coming, it seemed.
She does that a lot. She did that at Thanksgiving with the brother too. She invited Logan's brother, who had not seen him in many years, which is Greg's grandfather. You know,
Yes.
I love how they casted them, and they both are these tall, skinny guys. It's so great. But anyway, and Logan getting railroaded by Marcia, he allows that because Marcia is who she is, right? He won't allow that with the children, though. You know.
Well, it was kind of an interesting moment when you see Kendall sit down with McDonald's.
That's what it was. Mm-hmm.
And sit and eat McDonald's with his dad. And how he immediately was not in defense mode. He turned right into a child and just loved that he got to eat McDonald's with his dad in that moment. It was really amazing how disarming that moment was for Kendall, because he didn't get to have those moments with his dad. So if it just presents itself, the opportunity, he immediately goes into a father-child moment of, okay, I get to have a Big Mac with my dad. I think that McDonald's scene is also supposed to tell us something else about Logan. And that is that class is something that he doesn't really have, not naturally. Now you talk to Tom. Tom takes Greg out to these fancy restaurants, and they eat like they eat like bird embryos, and like, you know, like he wants the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
He recognizes that their wine is shit when they get something from their vineyard. At one point, it's like vinegary and gross. But Logan likes a Big Mac. You know, he likes a Big Mac. He doesn't give a shit about the people making the Big Mac.
Mm-hmm.
They are objectified, right? They're not actual people, not real people. But he sure does like that Big Mac when Marcia isn't looking. And I think that's part of why he's doing it, is because she's not around and she won't let him eat that. Okay, and so then Dad plants some fake news stories about his own son,
Right.
which wind up coming true as Kendall spirals into self-sabotage mode. So we have weaponizing information going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And then also kind of, you know, targeting your vulnerable spots, and it works. And Kendall goes into a relapse self-sabotage mode.
It's the prophecy fulfilled too. It's the thing where an addict, you know, oh, that's who you think I am? That's who I'm going to be. You
Right.
know, and that's Kendall is fulfilling his father's prophecy of him, and he always will, regardless of what his dad thinks. That's how he's going to be. And, you know, and it's wild. We do have these, like, you know, many, I guess the whole show is based on the twists between those two, as far as like a lot of the like action happens because Kendall makes a choice that's out of character. And, you know, and we'll get to what those are and some of those things that happen as we kind of cover this, but it's just fascinating. You know, all the, just the dynamic is always fascinating.
When Kendall was talking to Stewie, at one point he said, Dad will never retreat. It will be hostile, hostile, hostile.
Yes.
That's the quote. That's exactly what he said to Stewie. So he knew going into all of this that there's no way that Dad was ever going to let him have what he wanted, and that he would fight him to the death for the prize, which is the, you know, the CEO position, having that power over the major operations of a multi-billion-dollar company. And, you know, those kids all feel entitled to that position for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is because they've been future faked and love bombed into thinking that at one point in time, or multiple points in time, they've thought that they are going to be the successor. Now let's move to Shiv's wedding. Shiv's wedding is fantastic. I would like to do a whole episode on Shiv's wedding, so I don't want to go into the details of it too much today. That'll be one of our bonus episodes, is just all about Shiv's wedding. But that's when we meet their mother, which is really super awesome. But at Shiv's wedding, Kendall is high on cocaine. And I think this is when he freaks out at his son.
Okay.
So he's at Siobhan's wedding, and he's simultaneously plotting a corporate takeover while he's at the wedding. Now, also at the wedding, he has been pushed to the side because him and his dad aren't speaking, right? And so
we don't even know if the dad's going to show up, right?
True,
so there's a whole drama about that. Maybe he'll show up, maybe he won't, because he's trying to deal with. Now, there's 2 attempted takeovers in this season, which makes it a little confusing, because there is a vote of no confidence that happens kind of mid-season, and then there's an attempted hostile takeover that bleeds on into the 2nd and 3rd seasons. All right, so it's a little difficult to kind of like remember which is which as we talk about it. But
we could say 3 though, because when Kendall has a stroke, or when Logan has his stroke, there's that takeover as well.
Right.
And then that takeover is what reveals that there was the debt. And then that's what says that now we're doing the vote of no confidence. Yeah. And then there's something else then that happens too at the end.
It's like we're stuck in some weird family cycle, you know?
That they do over and over again.
Right. So it's you know, the whole wedding is tremendous, as you said, and the drama that, you know, is going on. But as you said that, you know, I guess Kendall was kind of like in his own little world there, trying to plan his whole hostile takeover. And I'm not sure if this is the vote of no confidence or the attempted hostile takeover that he's planning. And that was the point I was trying to make. But yes, this is when he's so wrapped up in whatever he's doing that he can't even see that it's his son to know, oh, I shouldn't be cussing my son out who has sensory issues, this is going to traumatize for years to come. You know, can't even take the time to just stop for a second and think, what's going on around me? You know, again, you said, you know, I guess a lot of times you said the elephant, or was it horse in a hospital? You know, I've heard bull in a china shop is a lot of time what people say too, because it, you know, if you've never seen a video of a deer making its way into a store or something like that, look that up. That's on the internet and it's wild. They destroy the place, you know, and that's kind of what Kendall is when he's in these states where he's just lashing out. And again, the word impotence comes up a lot with me when I watch him, because he's struggling so hard against everything, and all he does is end up hurting himself, and you know, in the form of hurting his son.
Kendall has been shoved aside because if he was too much of a central figure at the wedding, then Logan wouldn't show up, and the groom really wants Logan to come to the wedding, right? So the mom has said to Kendall, you know, I need you to kind of stay over there, please. So while he's being ostracized so that maybe Logan will show, he's also simultaneously working on, I believe, the vote of no confidence, and it fax gets sent to the wrong printer. And they're like, wait, where's that printer? Oh no, it's on the other side of the house. Like, and then he's flipping out, you know, Kendall's flipping out because now this evidence of them, what they're doing might be picked up somewhere else by someone else, and they're going to be outed for what they're trying to do. And then that's when the son shows up and gets screamed at. Now, when Kendall asks Logan if he thinks he could do the job of CEO, do you think I could have done it? I think when he realizes when the rug got pulled under, or at some point when he's not going to get it, he just flat out asks his dad. And maybe this is when they meet at night. You know, there's a time when Kendall and Logan meet by themselves outside, and Kendall has had his chef make this food, and Logan acts like he's kind of suspicious of it and doesn't want to eat it. And Kendall's like, what do you think, I'm going to poison you? I think that's this conversation. And Logan says to him, what have you had your entire life that I didn't give you? I blame myself. I spoiled you. And now you're fucked. And I'm sorry you're a hothouse flower, that you're nothing. You're curdled cream. Maybe you should write a book or collect sports cars or something. But for the world, nah, I'm sorry. You're not made for it. And then Kendall calls him a fucking beast. So now here we are again with the wildlife metaphors. He calls his dad a beast after he gets called a hothouse flower. And I went and I looked that up. What's a hothouse flower?
I don't know.
It's obviously some kind of a jab. And the definition is a hothouse flower is a person who is very fragile and vulnerable as a result of having been sheltered. So basically, he's just saying, I sheltered you and now you're nothing. And so that's my fault that you're such a weakling.
But it is what it is.
But it is what it is. And you're just not made for it. You're not built for it. Now, something happens during the wedding. You know, Kendall is now on a downward spiral. His dad is pulled his rug out from underneath of him so many times, and he's trying to meet minds with his dad. His dad is very abusive and says mean and cruel things like that I just mentioned. And so he finds drugs and alcohol because that's what he does, and he knows where to find them and who to ask. And he starts talking to one of the waiters or caterers that's working the wedding.
It's the kid's car.
Okay.
And so what had happened is that it's wild because earlier in the episode, this kid is abused by Logan. Logan hits this guy.
That is true. That's right.
And
he
so
does.
we see
he does
this
the same thing where he like swats him
Yes.
away.
Fascinating that happens. And, so we see the driver paying this kid off. And that's why he's willing to leave the place and go with Kendall, because he's already made money for the night. Maybe he can make some more, so they end up, getting in a car accident. And this car accident, a lot happens here. So, Kendall ends up driving because the other guy's too wasted to drive because he was doing ketamine, because Kendall wanted some cocaine, but the guy's like, oh, well, this is ketamine. Let's go get some coke. So they decide to go get some coke, and Kendall's not used to driving this car. He's also drunk, all right, and wasted and whatever else they've been doing. And so a deer is in the middle of the road. He does not have the reaction time to handle this. They go into a bunch of water. And what happens from here is Kendall dives a few times to try to see if he can help, but it's pitch black and there's nothing he can do. So the guy dies, and Kendall runs away. But there's evidence that Kendall was there. There is his key card, all right, from his room, and maybe a couple other things that are found by Logan's men. So, Kendall is called to a meeting with his father. All right. Kendall has heard the next day that, yes, this happened, but he's not sure that what anyone else knows. And it turns out his father has already covered everything up. All right. And is telling him what we're going to do now. And he says, that guy, I think he stole some stuff from your room, didn't he? So they decide that it's, this person has stole something from his room. That's the cover story. So that's why the key card and his belongings are near the crash site. And it is a terrifying scene, honestly, because we see the power that Logan has. We've seen it, but we see it, in its like purest form here, where not only is he, have the power to cover up something that is clearly maybe a crime of some kind, I'm not sure, negligence at least, but he's also now got power over his son that he's going to use until his son can't take it anymore.
And boy, does he, for sure. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out about Kendall after this incident is that he immediately goes back to his room and gets cleaned up, and immediately goes to the center of the dance floor with his children.
For an alibi, yes. And he's using his children for an alibi. He starts saying hi to everyone he can see. Oh, they saw him here at this time. That's what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. And he's dancing and having a good time with his kids, and Rava goes out there. And it's like, I believe that, you kind of see him go from being in the car with the kid, the accident happens, then the kid dies, he gets his way back to the room, and he goes through this transformation of bottom of the pond to dance floor of the wedding, and creating that alibi for himself. And that's the psychopath in him that I was mentioning at the beginning of this episode, that we know he's a narcissist, but he has things about him that are psychopathic. I mean, to have had that just happen and have the malevolent creativity to, okay, now I need to immediately create an alibi. I need to go out, and then he's acting happy and dancing with his kids and having fun. I mean, would you be able to do that?
No.
I don't think I would either. I think that if that was something that just, you saw me last October after a car accident where nobody was hurt, and I was in a trauma state myself of just having had something that could have been bad happen when I had an accident last year. So if something terrible really actually had happened, you know, I don't think I would be able to and go dance on a dance floor right afterwards. I just don't think that, people that have empathy, or I guess people that are able to connect with their empathy, would be able to just act like it didn't even happen and not be affected by it. Or, you know, he is affected by it, but he's only affected by it in relationship to him being caught.
Yes.
So he doesn't cry at all about it happening, does he? Until he sees that daddy knows.
Yes, he's upset in the bathroom. He's upset on his way to the bathroom where he's cleaning the clothes. But again, we don't know if he's upset that maybe he'll be caught, or if he's upset that someone died. You know, we learn later on that, you know, in the show, that he has not processed this at all, and doesn't really through the whole show. You know, it becomes an issue later on. And it also shows a little bit about his corporate mindset. He accesses that psychopath part of his brain to do his corporate shit. So when something crazy goes on, he snaps into that same, oh, I'm going to dance on the dance floor role, and starts to make sure that everyone knows that he looks great. And this is what it's about. And it's a fascinating show. And that whole, you know, this all just sets up everything that comes up after it. It plays a part in every single thing that happens after this, and it's just an incredible ending to a season. And Kendall, you feel so bad for him, but at the same time, he's just awful, you know. And it's just like I understand why I should feel sympathetic for him, but I don't at all.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. And what people love to say to me all the time: abused people abuse people. Well, they were abused, and that's why. So, I mean, they didn't choose this. If they were abused and this is what happened, then, you know, yeah, okay. But yeah, we're aware of that. We know that. We know that this is how these people are created, is through emotional neglect, through being taught entitlement, being spoiled, never having actually suffered through anything, not being taught empathy, not being modeled empathy, and then, you know, having been actually abused themselves. You know, yeah, we know how this is created. We already know this. But, you know, for what you mentioned just a second ago, in terms of this incident being a part of the whole series, it is important to remember that this happened, because there's even little just tiny moments and comments that come across in the dialogue that if you didn't remember why, say, for example, Logan likes to use a nickname Killer for Kendall. Now you know, hey, that's not
more than once. He will casually call him Killer, or he will explain to him, "You're not a killer." It takes a minute. And it's like, what does he mean? Yeah. I'm confused. You know, Kendall's super confused as his son, and it's like, it's wild, man. What an amazing show.
So in these last few minutes, Andrew, will you wrap us up and, you know, end the season for us and with some thoughts?
Yeah.
For Kendall.
Yeah, for Kendall, as we said, you know, we have this whole blackmail thing that pops up here, which is basically that now his father has him because he has this situation, which, you know, honestly, I don't know that it's so funny, because yes, this person died and that's terrible, but I don't know that this would be so bad for Kendall if this came out. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be the end of the world for him. But he thinks it would. And so that's all that matters. And so his father is going to use that to basically just control him. And that is what leads to the next big moment in Kendall's, you know, kind of like storyline, which is that, you know, he decides to turn on his father. And so, you know, it's a wild show. And I believe the season ends with this whole situation happening. And, you know, basically a shot on Logan Roy being like, yep, I won again, you know, and that's kind of where we're left with the season. I love the first season of the show. I think that it's one of the least well shot and like produced ones, but it's amazing. It's so good that you know, when you get to the later seasons, they just look better and they get better at making the show. So it becomes even more in depth and even more kind of like broad, as far as like, instead of focusing on one or two things, they can focus on 7. And we can get that out of, you know, get great stuff out of all 7 of them. And so, you know, I'm fascinated to see where we go next, as far as, you know, who we're going to cover next, and, you know, what their relationship's going to be to Logan Roy, because that's what this is all about.
Okay, so we just finished recapping Kendall Roy season 1 Succession. We took you through when we met him and what state he was in, to the end of the season of season 1 and what state he's in now towards the end. Now, in the next episode that Andrew and I are going to record is about Siobhan Roy during season 1. But keep in mind that there's not as much going on with her during season 1 other than the wedding. And since I want to do a whole other episode for the wedding, this next episode with Siobhan will probably want to be one of our shorter episodes. But I think it's important to go ahead and get started with her storyline and getting to know her during these early parts of the series. Andrew, thank you so much for doing this with me. It's super fun, and we'll get back together again to record about Siobhan.
I'm excited for next time to tell everybody about Pinky and her transition from politics to family business. You know, that's what her season 1's all about, and why does that happen? I can't wait to talk about it.
It'll be fun. All right, everybody, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.